Hello, I'm Corinna Howard and this is the Monday Night Review. Hello and welcome to episode 118 of the Monday Night Review. I hope you are all well. I've said before how I don't really like recording at night, but I'm recording at night, so I apologise in advance for tumbling over my words, which I no doubt will do. But one of the massive benefits of living in the countryside is the owls. From the moment we moved in, we hear at least 2 owls a night, and because it's autumn, they're already out. It's dark outside. I'm recording at 10 to 7 on a Friday, and the owls are hooting. I don't think you'll be able to hear them, but they're there, and it's kind of atmospheric. Though I have just filmed a TikTok on Hail for Nog. If you've listened to that episode, it's pretty scary. I felt pretty all consumed by it when I was researching it, and just even dipping back in to talk about it to do a TikTok, it was pretty spooky. And now I'm sitting here in the dark in an office in my garden trying not to get freaked out. I am going to talk today, it's kind of similar. We did, thanks for your messages about Trevelyan Evans' episode. It's a real, it's really difficult to know. And we have another one, although this is slightly different. And then I'm probably going to go for spooky for a bit. I should be doing spooky now, I suppose. My kids are obsessed with Halloween. I always joke that it's because I spent the entire 24 hours of Halloween on 2012 in labour with my firstborn. And therefore, that's why he has sprung forth as the biggest fan of Halloween the world has ever seen. I got my epidural at 10 to 7 that night, and I switched on the telly. I went from being in excruciating pain. Shout out to anyone who has back-to-back babies. There's nothing like it in the world. And my epidural kicked in, switched on the telly. The Addams Family was on. My husband had never seen it. He was traumatised having seen me in so much pain. And I was like, right, I've just been doing pre-birth stuff for the whole day. We are going to watch the Addams Family. So me and the midwife and my husband, both of them fairly traumatized, just sat and watched the Addams Family, and it was fantastic. And did that have an influence on the baby being born? Perhaps, but I came back from Lidl and gave them some little Halloween socks, and it was like Christmas had come in my house. They just love it. So I feel like I should be doing spookier episodes in the run up to Halloween, but I was reading up on this, as I often do. I go down wormholes on the internet and I'll be researching one thing and then something else will be mentioned, and then I'm reading up on that and then something else will be mentioned. I have this huge list which I add things to and take things off, and Holly adds things to, thank God for Holly. So today's episode comes from being down a wormhole, and it's another head scratcher. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about Renee and Andrew Macrae. In February 2023, so this February, 80-year-old William McDowell died less than 6 months into his life sentence for the murder of Renee and Andrew Macrae. Renee and her 3-year-old son have not been seen since 1976, and despite McDowell's conviction in 2022, their bodies have still never been found. In fact, for a long time, theirs was the UK's longest-running missing persons case. So let's go back to November 1976. Renee Macrae, born Christina Catherine MacDonald, was a 36-year-old woman living in Inverness in Scotland. She had 2 children with her husband, Gordon Macrae, from whom she was separated, 9-year-old Gordon Jr. and 3-year-old Andrew. On the 12th of November, she dropped Gordon Jr. off at his father's office and set off with Andrew towards Perth, apparently to visit her sister in Kilmarnock. They never arrived, and later that night, a train driver spotted her BMW burning in an isolated lay-by about 18 miles south of Inverness. The fire department and the police arrived. There is no one in the car, but they do find a substantial amount of blood in the boot of the car. If you look at the burnt-out car, I'll put a picture up, of course, the boot is the least affected. It's like it started at the front and burnt through. So they find blood in the back. Now, there's not enough to say that someone has definitely lost their life there, but it's more than a nosebleed or a cut finger. But this is 1976, so there's no way of knowing whose blood it was or where it came from. Renee's suitcase and Andrew's pram are also missing. She'd packed those to take to her sisters for the weekend. Now, Inverness in 1976 was smaller and more remote than it is now. This is the Scottish Highlands. And the disappearance of a mother and young child was big news. Lots of people were interviewed and witnesses were asked to come forward. Everyone knew about this case, and it is one of those historical local cases. Everyone from the Inverness area knows of the case of Renee and Andrew Macrae. It was just unheard of for this kind of thing to happen. Lots of people were interviewed and asked, anyone with any information was asked to come forward. And come forward they did, including a woman who lived in a farmhouse a few hundred yards from the lay-by, who said that night her mother had heard a blood-curdling scream at about 7:30 or 8 that evening. And the woman, when interviewed about it in 2023 or 2022, is still visibly upset about how traumatised her mother was. Another woman reported driving past and seeing a man with wide, staring eyes pushing a children's buggy with something slumped out of the side along the edge of the A9 in this atrocious weather that they're having. And what's very interesting is, because this goes on trial in 2022, we as the public then learn all about the witnesses and all of these statements. So all the while, police are searching for any evidence of Renee Macrae and her son Andrew, and they are searching for bodies. It's called the biggest police hunt the Highlands has ever seen. And there are plenty of places where bodies could be disposed of in the Scottish Highlands. It's the same as we were talking about in Wales. There is a lot of landscape there. But the search is huge and detailed. Over the course of 8 weeks, 200 volunteers helped 100 police search an area covering 100 square miles. An RAF Canberra spy plane made sweeps of the moors with equipment capable of detecting the disturbed earth of hastily dug graves. Quarries, lakes, rivers were all searched by men and dogs, and even an Italian dive team who had come over to hunt for the Loch Ness Monster offered to help, and they went diving to see if they could find anything. 13 million litres of water was pumped from a pool and the silt taken out for tests to see if there was any evidence. I mean, they really searched. Renee was petite. She was 5 foot tall with blonde hair. She's very close with her family, especially her sister Morag. They had been talented Highland dancers when they were girls, winning medals together. And it was with Morag that Renee was supposed to be staying that weekend. So on the 12th of November, Renee had gone to get her hair done, and she'd then dropped Gordon Jr. at his father's office at about 5 p.m. By this time, Renee and Gordon Sr. had been separated for about 2 years, seemingly at the instigation of Renee. At 10 p.m, police in Inverness call Morag to see if Renee had somehow arrived, in another way, but she hasn't seen her. And it transpires that Morag wasn't expecting her at all that weekend. Morag knows there is someone who will have more information, and she immediately calls Valerie Steventon, Renee's closest friend from childhood. She's her confidant. And without Valerie Steventon, this case would have stalled completely. Valerie Steventon not only knew where Renee and Andrew was supposed to be that weekend, but with whom. Lots of people knew that Renee had a boyfriend, but no one knew who it was except for Valerie. And I don't think Morag really knew who it was. And that boyfriend was William McDowell, company secretary at Gordon Macrae's successful building contractors firm. It's her relationship, people described it as a clandestine association, that she had a boyfriend, but nobody knows. And it's William McDowell, a married man and they had been seeing each other for quite a long time. And Valerie said, quote, she was very much in love with William McDowell. And Renee had said to Valerie that they were going to spend the weekend with William in Perthshire, and that he'd wanted her to keep it a secret. They were going to spend the weekend together and it was going to be lovely. He needed some time away and she wasn't to tell anyone. And he doesn't know that Valerie knows. And if she hadn't known, he would never have been indicted. At 9:30 in the morning on the 12th, the day they disappear, Renee and Andrew come for coffee with Valerie. Renee's very excited. She's happy to be going away with the man she loved. And just really excited for the weekend. When interviewed, William McDowell denied everything. He said he wasn't having a relationship with her. There was no plan to go away. He gives his first statement to the police 3 days after the disappearance in 1976. He said he got home at 8:15 or so. He says, quote, I deny any association with Mrs. Macrae. That's in his original statement. 3 hours later, he says, quote, during February 1972, I became involved in an affair with Renee Macrae. And he said it was purely physical, it was not emotional, he was never going to leave his family. But this changed for her when she left her husband. She obviously wanted to progress, and we will see why. He said, if anything, he was guilty of misleading her, but as far as he was concerned, it was literally just a physical thing. Now, he has a beautiful family home. He's got children. He's got horses. He could lose it all. He could lose his job. This is a very dangerous affair for him to be having. And he clearly has no intention for that to happen. Now, on the night of the 12th, he arrives home at 8:30 p.m. and this gives him an alibi. And because he has an alibi, you know, as far as he's concerned, you know, men are very trustworthy. Of course, he was having a bit of leg over with this woman and it wasn't very good for anyone to find out. And she took it too far. And the case just drifts off and goes cold. But then in 2018, the case is reopened. Many of the witnesses had since died, but there are all the statements, and the statements are gone over with a fine-tooth comb. And those who were still alive and still able to be spoken to were. This is being investigated as a murder, and the 12th of November 1976 is being considered the day of Renee and Andrew Macrae's murder. And it's believed that they were killed in the car in the lay-by. Now, there is no direct evidence of the killing or the removal of the bodies from the lay-by, so everything is going to be circumstantial evidence. But when you put it all together, it forms a case. In 2019, blood found in the boot of her car is tested with new forensic methods, and it's confirmed that the blood is Renee's. The subsequent trial, the forensic scientist involved in the case explained that to create that much blood requires something actively bleeding or a body so saturated in blood that it's actually dripping off. So in the early descriptions, it's described as drops of blood. But that sort of makes it think like, when you get a nosebleed. This was not. This was drops of blood, as in not spurting from a wound, an arterial wound, but more than a nosebleed, more than a cut finger. This was a lot of blood. And who's on this trial? Renee's boyfriend, William McDowell. Now, with a 45-year-old case, it's really difficult to rely on witnesses. It's difficult to rely on witnesses anyway because everyone observes things differently and hindsight can subconsciously change what you've perceived. 45 years later, obviously, I can't remember what I was doing. I mean, 45 years ago, I was not even born, but I can't remember what I was doing a year ago most of the time. So a lot of the time, the witness statements taken in 1976 were read to the jury. And again, this can affect the strength of the evidence. If you're just having a statement read to you, it has a different effect on you to if you're hearing that person speak it themselves. Now, we know, us true crime people know, that if a woman goes missing, the first person you check in on is Gordon Macrae, and he seems to have more motive. But they get on okay. Why would he dispose of it? Be one thing to get rid of his separated wife, but it's quite a lot to also kill your child. Now, firstly, all indicators point to him being at the office at the time of the murder. We know that Gordon Jr. was dropped off at the office. Charles Macrae, his brother, Gordon's brother, says that he was in a business meeting that evening until 8. He also said that Gordon actually was the one who made the effort in the marriage. He, was ready to put work in, and Renee had just given up. Gordon Macrae would be called as special defence at this trial because he's the obvious person, but also William McDowell says, I didn't do it. It's obviously the husband. So he has to go to court as well. Now, he's 85. So it's an 85-year-old man giving evidence here. And he is asked a number of times if... and he then says to the court that a number of times he'd asked Renee if she was seeing someone who worked for him. And she denied it. Now, he's got his own girlfriend. He's seeing a lady called Iris Davidson. And there's a sort of confusing bit where it would seem that she'd said he was talking about disposing of bodies in a quarry, and how if you put a body in the bottom of a quarry and there was a landslide, the evidence would be lost. He absolutely denies any kind of conversation like this. There seems to be no real evidence for this. We don't hear a lot or know a lot about his relationship with Iris Davidson, whether it's very serious or not, I don't know. And so Gordon Macrae, because he has an actual alibi, he's in a meeting with other people, not just his brother. His son has been dropped off. So you don't get your son dropped off, pop him in the car to go and murder someone. It just doesn't sort of fit right. So he's quickly dismissed. But what I find very intriguing about this is the time frame between, and the fact that there has been no trace of Renee or Andrew ever found, because we know that their bodies are disposed of in a lay-by, and we know that he gets home at around 8:30. So he hasn't had all night to drive somewhere remote, which again, the fact that nothing's been found makes me believe that there was a lot of premeditation in this case. Something else would come up from Valerie Stevenson. Renee told Valerie that McDowell was Andrew's father. So this would explain why Gordon Jr. was left with his father and not Andrew. Although, obviously, 1976, dads are less hands-on. So leaving a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old with his father is a lot different to leaving a 3-year-old. But this would come out from Valerie because in August 1976, Renee goes to see Valerie and she says, William has got a job in Shetland and we're all going. So he knows that Andrew is his son and he wants to be a part of his life, according to Renee. The weeks before she went missing, he told her that he'd booked this self-contained chalet. in Perth somewhere. They were going to go away for the weekend. And he wanted this weekend to be an opportunity to bond with his son. Because obviously you're having an affair. He doesn't get a lot of time with Andrew when he's seeing Renee. I'm assuming it's child-free. So he has said, let's go away for this weekend. Bring Andrew. We will have time together as a family and it will be great. And then we're moving to Shetland the week after. So that's the plan in November on the 12th. And as we know, she goes and has a cup of coffee with Valerie that morning that she disappears. She's very excited. And what's so distressing is Valerie says, you know, Andrew was such a sweet boy and she offered to keep him that weekend. But Renee said that Bill had insisted that she takes Andrew with him because he wants to bond with his son. It's clear that McDowell has no intention of going away for the weekend and there are no plans to move to Shetland. So whether McDowell, whatever he says, Renee is not supposed to be telling anyone this, and she is telling her confidant. She is telling Valerie. But there are no plans in place for a move to Shetland. He would lose his job at Macrae's when it comes out that he's been having an affair with Renee, but he has not quit his job, applied for another job in Shetland, got another job in Shetland. There's absolutely none of that's true. There is no booking of a chalet that weekend. So she's driving somewhere. She obviously thinks she's going somewhere. She's going to meet someone. It's not by chance that she stops at this lay-by and he happens to be there. You don't wait, I don't assume, in lay-bys for young women to come so that you can bump them off. So he hadn't made the booking. What was he going to do? She's got a suitcase, she's got a pram, she's got a child. Was he seriously believing that we thought, oh, I just was going to tell her it was over in the lay-by and then she happened to get bumped off. He denies all knowledge of seeing her that night or having anything to do with her. His wife, Rosemary McDowell, was interviewed at the time and clearly stood by him. She was still his wife when he gets taken to court. But at the time, when interviewed, she says, quote, "I don't know why you're getting at me for. I'm not the one who stabbed her or whatever." Now, later at the trial, when asked about this, she kept repeating, "It just came out. It just came out." But I see it is a bit of an odd thing to say. And she does come across as a very angry woman. She's surprisingly angry when you hear her in court. And she has a right to be. Her husband, at the very best, is an adulterous liar. And she's been caught up in it. I'd be so pissed off if I had the police and the press up in my face and around my kids because of something my husband did. I'd be furious. She has every right to be cross, but it is an odd thing to say. I feel like if the police came to my door the week after my husband's mistress had disappeared, I might say, "I didn't know he was having an affair, so I don't know why you're asking me questions." I don't think I'd even think about her being stabbed. I think it is a very odd thing to say. She also said there was nothing noticeably different about her husband's demeanour when he got home. What is upsetting is, obviously, whilst they're searching for Renee and Andrew, they go to her house, and throughout the house, not only are there signs of Andrew's recent 3rd birthday celebration, but there are signs of packing. She's got boxes out, she's packing everything up. This is a woman who thinks that she is days or weeks away from moving. And she has told Valerie that they are moving to the Shetland Islands. So, to me, the fact that she's packing, she's been told that they're moving to the Shetland Islands, She's been told that they're going away for the weekend when there is no weekend plan. The fact that we have no sign of the bodies, to me, points to massive premeditation. She was about to really mess up his life. He had a good, well-paid job. He has a terrifying wife. He has 2 daughters. They have a beautiful house. They have animals. They have an idyllic life. And Renee is about to mess it up for him. And Andrew's about to mess it up for him. And so he, I believe, has decided to dispose of her. Now, on Friday the 12th of November 1976, it would turn out that McDowell had behaved a bit strangely in the office. He'd asked one office secretary to make a reservation in a restaurant for 8 p.m. for him and his wife. He was quite vocal about it. He shouted at her across the office, could she do this for him? He made a big fuss about, I'm going out on a date with my wife. He then goes to another phone. He phones his wife and tells her that they couldn't make a booking. There was no space in the restaurant, so they couldn't go out. Even though we know from the secretary that one had already been made. He then he calls internally on the phone a different secretary quietly and asks her to phone up and cancel the booking. What an idiot. Just don't turn up. Anyway, so very vocal, book us a table, 8 o'clock, I'm taking my wife out to dinner, it's date night with my wife, blah, 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 blah. Phones his wife, says we couldn't get a table, they're all booked up, and then quietly phones another secretary in the office and says, please, can you cancel the table? He then leaves the office at about 6 p.m. He makes it clear that he's going for a few drinks at the Mercury Inn with colleagues, something he had never done before, so they were all really surprised about it. And then he leaves. Witnesses also come forward and say that they had seen 2 cars in the lay-by. And what's really interesting is that they see the BMW that would be Renee's BMW that was later found burnt out, but they also identified it as a Volvo. And William McDowell had a Volvo. So a number of witnesses say, I saw 2 cars, I believe them to be a BMW and a Volvo. Now, another woman also says that she saw a man walking towards her car as she was driving. She's driving quite slow. The roads aren't good. 76, cars aren't what they are now. And it's terrible weather. And she just sees this man coming towards her with a pushchair. And whatever is in the pushchair is hanging over the side. After the disappearance, William McDowell goes to get a new boot floor for his car. The mechanic goes to have a look, but there is no floor in the boot of his car. McDowell has removed it. And the mechanic was like, how did you even remove it? It's not a thing we do, replacing this. It's a really, sturdy, easily cleanable, like what? And he said, he burnt it, having been doing a refurb on his house, and he somehow burnt the boot floor of his car. For Americans, a boot is a trunk. And the mechanic said, I've never seen anything like it before. I've never seen anything like it since. It was a really hard thing to source. McDowell was really rude, really angry about it, flounces off, and eventually goes back and apologises, and they find him a second-hand one that they put in his car for him. It all seems pretty clear-cut, and it is decided, the jury agree, William McDowell is given a life sentence for the murders of Renee and Andrew Macrae based on this circumstantial evidence. But there is one thing that is strange. Renee's doctor, local doctor, knows everyone really well, and a neighbour both came forward and said that they'd seen Renee in her car, and in the passenger seat was a Mexican-looking man with a moustache. And they noted it because obviously Scottish Highlands, not a lot of Mexicans. And this was, a big deal. For me, though, I wouldn't be surprised if this was McDowell wearing a moustache as a disguise. Perhaps they were going somewhere and he knew, again, it's a small town. People might know who he is, stick a moustache on from afar, people aren't going to know who he is. So he hasn't been seen before or since, this strange man with a moustache, but it is a spanner in the works. And so in 2022, William McDowell is sent to prison, and less than 6 months later, he dies of the health complications that he's had for a while. He never confesses, never admits his guilt, and therefore never gives any indication to where he disposed of Renee Macrae and Andrew Macrae, and we still have no idea where they are. And that's the distressing story of Renee and Andrew Macrae. I'm fairly confident. I watched there's a 2-part documentary called Murder Trial that's very interesting. I watched that. I mean, I've read, there's lots of newspaper articles on it. For me, the fact that she's been told that they're moving to Shetland, it's a classic thing that you hear about where, she moved, they've moved. You're never going to hear from them again because they've moved. It's a sort of laying of the plans for her to disappear, and whether he just brought it forward with the week, we're having the weekend in Perth, whether, I don't know. But for me, the fact that she's been given 2 instances, the weekend away and the job move to the Shetland Island, to Shetland, to me indicates that he had something to do with it. I think it would be very unusual, though not 100%, definitely didn't happen, for a woman to be told these massive lies by the man that she's seeing and then to be murdered by someone else. Because when the move to Shetland didn't happen, and she's packing up her house, so she thinks it's happening, I believe it was supposed to happen a week or 2 after this weekend. Then when it doesn't happen, what's she going to do? She's going to be mad. She's going to be furious. She's packed up her house. She's going to say, I'm going to tell your wife. I'm going to tell my husband. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your wife. You're going to lose, and I think he just couldn't risk it. He'd backed himself into a corner, and rather than dealing, lying in the bed he's made, he's disposed of these 2 people. But I just am so intrigued because he doesn't get home notably late. So how has he disposed of these bodies? Where is the pushchair? Where is the suitcase? Where was he pushing the pushchair to if that witness did see him? There's so many unanswered questions, and sadly we're never going to know. He's gone. So unless it wasn't him and someone else comes forward, or his wife knows more than she's letting on, I don't know. Thanks for all your lovely messages. If you've sent me less than lovely messages, shame on you. I hope that everyone is well. Do come and find me on TikTok. You can get pictures to go with each story, because sometimes I know it's helpful to see any evidence or layouts or whatever on Instagram and Facebook. Come and join the Patreon, where there's extra episodes, discount codes for merch, and that kind of thing. And you can email me, themondaynightrevue@gmail.com. And until next time, be kind, stay safe, and always check the back seats before you drive.